Welcome to Paranormal Passion, the podcast that intertwines the eerie with the erotic. Join your hosts, Sarah and Jay, as they take you on a thrilling journey through spooky short stories that will give you chills and tantalize your senses. Each episode delves into the world of the supernatural through tales that explore the passion lurking just beyond the veil of the ordinary. Whether it's seductive specters or cryptid caresses, Paranormal Passion promises a delightful mix of spine-tingling suspense and sultry storytelling. Tune in, turn off the lights, and prepare for an unforgettable experience that will leave you breathless and wanting more. Please keep in mind that Paranormal Passion is intended for adult audiences, as it can get quite spicy. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome back, and thanks for tuning in to Paranormal Passion. I want to start the episode off today by expressing my genuine gratitude to everyone who has listened in so far. It has been a truly humbling experience to find that people out there enjoy what we're doing. Please feel free to like and subscribe anywhere you listen to us if you want to keep hearing more of my spooky and sultry stories. In this week's episode, we meet Jack Devlin, who is no stranger to bad luck. A busker with a whiskey-soaked voice and an old guitar, he had spent years chasing dreams that never quite came true. Until one fateful night, when he stumbled upon something strange. A coin glinting gold beneath the city's damp streets. From that moment on, Jack's luck changed. Overnight fame, fortune, and temptation wrapped in silk sheets and whispered promises. But luck is a fickle thing. And in this St. Patrick's Day special, we ask, when fortune finally smiles on you, how much of yourself are you willing to lose to keep it? Turn down the lights, pour yourself a pint, and listen to this evening's tale, Luck Be a Leprechaun Tonight. It all started with a coin. Jack Devlin had spent most of his life chasing dreams that never quite came true. He was a busker, a singer with a whiskey-soaked voice and calloused fingers from years of strumming his old guitar. Chicago had chewed him up, spit him out, and left him for dead on the cold streets with nothing but songs and sorrow. Yet he still believed that one day luck would smile on him. Luck did more than smile. It laughed. The night Jack found the coin, he was drunk. Not the kind of drunkenness that made the world soft and pleasant, but the bitter, gnawing kind that came after too many nights of failure. His latest gig had ended in the usual disappointment. A half-empty dive bar, a crowd more interested in their drinks than his music, and a bartender who paid him in lukewarm beer and a handful of crumpled singles. With his guitar slung over his back and whiskey burning in his veins, he staggered through the damp streets of Chicago, cursing his luck. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the pavement still glistened beneath the flickering neon of a failing bar on Wabash. Its sign buzzed weakly, one letter already dead, casting eerie shadows against the crumbling brick walls of the alley beside it. Jack moved to lean against the wall, rubbing his temples, when he stubbed his toe on something uneven. A loose cobblestone jutting slightly from the ground, like it was placed there just to make his night that much more miserable. Taking his rage and frustration out on the inanimate object, he kicked it with his already aching foot. The stone whipped away, clattering down the vacant street. He looked down to make sure he had removed the object of his most recent frustration. The hole the rock had left behind revealed something that shouldn't have been there, something shining in the dim light. It looked like gold. This wasn't the fool's gold of cheap trinkets worn by barflies. It was something old, real, and the way it shimmered, even in the alley's half-light, was mesmerizing. He crouched down, brushing away dirt and grime, and pried the object from its hiding place. It was a coin, thick and heavy, its edges worn smooth by time. Strange Celtic symbols shimmered across its surface, twisting into patterns that seemed to almost shift under his gaze. The metal was warm, unnaturally so in the cool and damp night air. It was as if it had been waiting for him. The moment his fingers closed around it, a pulse ran up his arm. Not a shock, but something deeper, a feeling that seeped into his bones. It spread through him, tingling beneath his skin, as if the universe itself had finally noticed his very existence and had begun to slightly tilt in his favor. Jack stood there, breathless, the weight of the coin resting in his palm like a promise. And for the first time in his life, he felt lucky. The very next day, his life started to change. Jack shook the frost off of his threadbare sleeping bag as he rose to start his day. He headed to his usual haunts, where he planned to catch the morning rush of commuters, people with heavy pockets but stunted hearts. Every bus he needed to take would appear as if out of nowhere, the exact moment he arrived at the stop. And every light seemed to turn green to get him where he was going. His routine began, playing energetic ballads to motivate crowds of businessmen and women on their way to their cushy office jobs, people who were usually too busy to even glance his way. But this morning was different. The crowd swarmed Jack as soon as his strumming began. They couldn't get enough of him or his music. It was as if they were drawn in with every chord he played. Normally, the morning misers would toss loose change and singles, but today they jockeyed for position to throw bills into his case. He saw 5s, 10s, even $20 bills piling up before his eyes. Jack beamed at the audience as he took his final bow and closed up his case for a lunch break. He smiled knowingly as he tapped the coin that warmed the pocket of his tattered jeans. But that was just the beginning. Later that afternoon, while busking outside of a cafe, still pulling a cheering crowd, a producer walked right up and offered him a deal on the spot. On his way to an evening gig, he found a $100 bill just lying in the gutter. Then, after his set, a woman, stunning, worlds out of his league, bought him a drink at the bar. And then another, and another. And after a night of free drinks, endless flattery, and bedroom eyes, she all but begged him to come home with her. Jack felt like he was in a waking dream. He went back to her place, of course, and the evening they spent together was like the kind that only happened in the movies, and not the kind of movies one would want to admit to watching. The woman, he realized he didn't even know her name, served Jack's needs in ways he could have only imagined in his wildest dreams. It had been a couple of years since his last romantic encounter. Women did not tend to want anything to do with a broke, homeless, and often literally starving artist. And he was wildly out of practice. But this woman knew what she was doing, and she was very good at it. She started the evening on her knees, barely giving Jack enough time to close the door behind them, as she undid his pants and took his length into her mouth. He lasted all of 30 seconds before she was swallowing his load, moaning appreciatively. Jack started to slur an apology, but her lips were on his in an instant, salty and sweet with cherry lip gloss.
"You taste so good,"
she purred as she took his hand, leading him through the apartment towards her bedroom. Through his drunken haze, he realized that this woman was loaded. A high-rise penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows spread out before him as he followed her. He grazed his hand across the back of a velvet sectional, accented by silk cushions and a cashmere throw. A custom-made coffee table, adorned with art books, fresh flowers, and a scented candle, soothed his senses as the smell of lavender enveloped him. A statement chandelier that must have been real crystal set the mood as it cast a warm glow from above. Not in 1,000 years did Jack ever think he would find himself in a place like this, with a woman like this. The bedroom was a sanctuary, a king-sized bed with an upholstered headboard, Egyptian cotton sheets, and a cashmere throw at the foot. She led him to the bed and kissed him deeply before pushing him back onto it. Jack couldn't remember the last time he had felt such comfort, such luxury, and he made an unspoken vow to achieve it and more for himself. He felt the coin heat in his pocket as a pulse almost identical to that first night surged through his body. His wandering mind snapped to attention as the woman began removing his pants. Panic flickered through him as he felt the warmth of the coin slip further down his leg. He tried to grab for it, but she shoved him back down into the feather duvet as she said,
"Let me take care of you."
and her mouth was around him again. She expertly worked his manhood with her lips and tongue until he was ready once more. Rising before him, she pulled off her dress, exposing glorious breasts, and her pussy, perfectly manicured with a landing strip, was glistening and ready to receive. She crawled up his body to sensually kiss him before bearing down, taking his full length right to the hilt within her. Her moan and the tightness of her core enveloping him was enough to make Jack completely forget about the coin. The rest of the night was a blur of passion and ecstasy. Jack woke to the smell of bacon, eggs, and the feeling of his cock rising to meet the beautiful stranger's full lips as she eagerly took in his morning length.
"Oh, I could get used to this,"
he thought to himself as a moan rose in his chest, pleasantly surprised with just how good the last 24 hours of his life had been. After a fairly awkward breakfast that he had devoured completely, Jack stumbled out of the apartment, stammering goodbyes while trying to pry himself out of the woman's embrace, reassuring and promising her that he would call the number she had scrawled on his arm. He still didn't know her name. With a spring in his step, his hand slipped into his pocket as he chuckled to himself at the absurdity of the night's events while walking down the hall. The comforting warmth of the coin filled Jack's palm, and his smile widened as he stepped into the fresh morning air. The world felt so different now, looked so different, like it was a glimmering jewel, his for the taking, and nothing could stop him. Jack made his way to the studio where he would meet with his producer. He couldn't believe he even had a producer, let alone that within an hour after recording a perfect take for every song, he was back on the street and on his way to a new apartment procured on his behalf by that producer. Jack's first single went viral. His shows sold out. Money rained down, women lined up, and life was finally his. The only thing that nagged at him were the dreams. Alone in his lavish penthouse apartment, tossing and turning in his king-sized bed, wrapped in sheets embroidered with real gold, they began. It started with flickering images that haunted his sleep. Dark forests, twisted laughter, something small and wicked dancing beneath the moon. Jack dismissed the would-be warnings and continued to revel in his newfound fame, drinking just a little more whiskey every night to ensure he was too drunk to dream. Then came the changes. One morning, as Jack lay in bed staring up at the mirrored ceiling as he plucked his guitar for inspiration, he could have sworn that his hair had grown red streaks. He sat up to try to get a better look, but it must have been a trick of the lighting. The chandeliers on either side of the bed cast a warm glow that was perfect for setting the mood of his many visitors, but not so great for any real visibility. He dismissed the thought and returned to his music. Before long, he got up and walked to the ensuite bathroom. It was time to get ready for the blues festival he would be headlining in Millennium Park that evening. He strode across the onyx and gold marble to a spacious glass-enclosed double shower, another feature he had planned around his many visitors. With its multiple rainfall shower heads, body jets, and a built-in steam function, it had plenty of room for getting clean and dirty. For a moment, he caught his reflection in the glass, and were his ears pointed?
What the fuck?
His voice echoed in the cavernous room. He ran to the vanity, pulling his hair back to inspect what he thought he had seen. Nothing. His ears were fine.
You're losing it, Jack,
He said aloud to himself.
Was that an accent? An Irish fucking accent?
Even his inner monologue had an accent. His mind raced.
Say something else.
He simultaneously thought and spoke the words aloud. No accent. Jack sighed and grabbed a bottle of whiskey from the mini fridge beneath the floating vanity before stepping into the shower. Later that night, under the searing stage lights, Jack was a man possessed. Sweat dripped from his brow, his voice raw with devotion as he poured himself into every note, every chord. The crowd roared, a tidal wave of sound that swallowed him whole. As the final chord rang out and the lights cut to black, the screams of encore swelled into a fevered chant. He stepped forward, the edge of the stage just beneath his feet, and reached into his pocket for a handful of autographed pics. But as his eyes adjusted to the dim glow of the venue, he froze. The audience wasn't just watching him, they were staring. Wide-eyed, unblinking bodies pressed together in a writhing mass, clawing and clambering over one another, hands outstretched as if to tear pieces of him away. Their pupils swallowed the light, black voids filled with nothing but hunger. It wasn't adoration, it was something deeper, something primal. His music wasn't just skill anymore. His music compelled people. It drew them in. And as the frenzy of the crowd surged toward him, Jack realized it made him a god. That was the same night he met Mara. She was waiting for him after the show, leaning against his brand new car like she owned it. Tall with jet black hair and hungry green eyes, Mara wasn't just another groupie. She moved like she belonged in his life, like she'd always been there, just waiting for him to notice.
You're interesting.
She purred, twirling one of his guitar picks between her fingers.
And lucky.
Jack had laughed, cocky and drunk on success.
You make your own luck.
He chided, but his hand reached into his pocket instinctively, running his thumb across the symbols engraved on his coin.
Do you now?
She murmured, stepping closer. Their first night together was a storm. Passionate, reckless, feral. Mara consumed him, left him breathless, clawing at his back, whispering things in his ear that made his blood boil. She wasn't just another woman. She was different. She knew things, asked the kind of questions that sent chills up his spine.
What's your secret, Jack?
She whispered one night, trailing kisses down his chest.
People don't just go from nothing to everything overnight.
He wanted to tell her. God, he wanted to, but something in him said no. Maybe it was the way her fingers traced his throat like she was memorizing the feel of his pulse. Maybe it was the way her eyes darkened when she thought he wasn't looking. But Jack didn't tell her about the coin. Not yet. The changes got worse. He walked into his spa-like bathroom, past the freestanding soaking tub in the center, heated floors warming his feet as he headed towards the gilded mirror. And as the antique grandfather clock in the hall chimed 12 bells, he stared at himself. His reflection flickered and twisted. For a moment he saw that wisper of red hair and those pointed ears. Then he shrunk, barely able to see over the marble counter as he looked down at his hands. His fingers, normally strong and well-defined, became bony and claw-like before his eyes. His teeth felt sharp. His laugh, high-pitched and unnatural, erupted out of him uncontrollably. And his appetite, he was ravenous. God, he was hungry. For music, for whiskey, for fame, and for her. Though the change faded with the first light of dawn, Jack was meticulous in hiding it. He would sequester himself in his soundproof studio, claiming that inspiration struck best in the dead of night, that solitude was essential for his art. But the truth was far darker. Hour after hour, he drowned himself in whiskey, bottle after bottle, yet the burning liquid never seemed to satisfy the gnawing thirst inside him. His fingers bled against the guitar strings as he played feverish, discordant melodies, songs that made his own skin crawl. Only when his sharp ears caught the low, steady hum of Mara's snoring down the hall did he finally emerge. Barefoot and weightless, he skipped to the kitchen, where he tore through the fridge and pantry, devouring everything in sight. But no matter how much he consumed, the hunger always remained. Despite his efforts to conceal his dark secret, Mara noticed. He wasn't sure what she noticed, but she was certainly suspicious.
You look different,
she said one morning, studying him as he buttoned his shirt.
Long night.
She didn't believe him. He walked to the bathroom as casually as he could, as his heart began to race. He locked the door behind him and studied himself in the floor-length mirror, checking his ears, his hands, his height. Nothing. What had she seen? Just as he turned away, a glimmer caught his eye, a glint of gold. He moved closer to the mirror, staring deeply into his own eyes. He pulled down his lower lids to inspect them. There was the source of the glimmer. A ring of gold rimmed his pupil. It gleamed in an otherworldly way. It was beautiful, terrifying, and mesmerizing. One night, Jack snapped out of a whiskey-fueled daze and realized he was watching Mara sleep. His clawed hands were reaching toward a pendant on her neck. The piece of jewelry was strange. The pendant hung from a delicate yet sturdy golden chain, its rich hue catching the light with every rise and fall of her chest. It was finely crafted, each link polished to a soft glow, whispering of old wealth and careful maintenance. He gently picked it up to inspect its center. There was a hollow space, an empty circular indentation framed by intricate filigree, clearly designed to hold something precious. The edges of the setting were slightly worn, as if fingers had traced them countless times in search of what once belonged there. The missing piece, likely some precious gem, had left a ghostly imprint, its absence both obvious and mysterious. Was it lost in a moment of carelessness? Stolen by time and fate? Or perhaps it was deliberately removed, hidden, or given as a keepsake to another?
Jack?
Mara murmured sleepily. His hands recoiled. He hobbled out of the room as quickly as his stunted legs could carry him. Mara rose in bed, and she smiled a slow, knowing smile, as her hand rose to caress the edges of her pendant, before gripping it tightly. Jack's stomach turned to ice as he quietly closed and locked the door to his studio behind him. That was close. Too close. He was starting to lose control of himself in those midnight hours. He needed to restrain his urges. Still, he couldn't resist her. The moment dawn broke, he found himself drawn right back to her still sleeping form. His lips found hers, his hands tangling in her hair, and for a while he forgot everything, forgot the warnings, forgot the growing wrongness inside him. All he knew was that he needed her. They surrendered to each other in a fervent embrace as the first light of dawn painted the sky. Lost in their shared desire, they indulged fully in the depth of their passion. Mara was softer than usual, more sensual as she yielded to him, allowing him to take control, a rare chance to lead their lovemaking, one he seized without hesitation. He claimed her body, his hand twisting in her hair as he gently pushed her head down into the feather-stuffed pillow and pounded into her from behind. Each stroke went deeper and deeper until he had buried himself entirely in her. He pulled on her hair then, raising her body up to meet his, sucking her earlobe as they both moaned a shared climax before collapsing in a panting heap, fully satiated. He had never felt such perfect bliss as when he was lying beside Mara, and before long he drifted into a restful sleep. What he should have felt was fear. The coin disappeared. When Jack woke up, it was gone. Panic surged through him as his body collapsed in on itself. His bones shrank, his muscles thinned, his skin whitened to something inhuman. He stumbled to the bathroom, gripping the sink as he stared at the shriveling monster in the mirror. A leprechaun. Not the kind from children's books. No. This was something older, crueler, eyes too bright, the rings of gold expanded to cover his entire iris, his nails too sharp. He had become a thing made for tricks and vengeance. And then Mara walked in. She was wearing the coin, only the coin. It gleamed in the pendant around her neck. She looked radiant, her skin glowing, her eyes bright with power, pupils rimmed in gold.
You!
Jack's voice came out wrong, high and twisted. His vision blurred, rage and fear tangling in his gut.
You took it!
Mara tilted her head, running her fingers over the coin at her throat.
Of course I did. But can one really take what belongs to them? You simply had it on loan.
She chuckled, eyeing his pitiful form. His luck was hers now, his power. Jack lunged. She caught him easily, too easily, flipping him onto the floor like she had tossed a coin. He tried to fight, but his body was failing, shrinking further.
Lady Luck was on your side for long enough.
Mara purred, crawling over him, pinning him down.
You used and abused her, twisted her power for your own selfish gain. You could have done anything with that luck, Jack. You could have changed the world.
She continued.
But now she takes back what's hers.
She whispered, her lips brushing and then biting his pointed ear. His shrunken cock betrayed him. He still could not resist her. She rode him slow and mercilessly, her nails raking down his chest, her every movement draining what little remained of him. Each moan, each whispered taunt, each grind of her hips was a death knell, ringing in his bones. Jack clawed at her, desperate, reaching. The coin. He had to get it back. But his arms were too weak, too shrunken, and his fingers curled uselessly, his strength slipping through them like sand. Then he saw it. The hunger in her eyes, so like his own, but different. The hunger was not for him, not for his touch, but for the luck, the power. She had never loved him. She had never wanted him, only what he carried. Rage boiled in his shrinking bones. His nails darkened, his teeth sharpened. Fury surged through his withering body. And when she leaned in, her mouth ghosting over his, he struck. His teeth sank into her throat. Mara screamed, writhing against him, her blood hot and slick between his lips. The chain snapped, and the coin tumbled free into her waiting palm. Jack gasped, his body seizing. The rush of power he expected never came. Instead, exuded from her, a golden glow spreading beneath her skin, her spine arching as if she were divinity itself. She looked down at him, eyes alight, her smile slow and wicked.
Oh, Jack,
She whispered, stroking his cheek.
you really thought that you could steal luck from me?
His breath hitched. The truth crashed down on him, suffocating. Mara didn't need the coin to create her luck. She was luck. And Lady Luck always won. Jack Devlin shrank beneath her, his body curling in on itself, his skin growing papery and thin. His mouth moved soundlessly, pleading, but Mara only sighed, running a loving hand through his brittle hair.
Don't look so surprised.
She cooed, pressing a kiss to his forehead.
You had a good run.
Jack tried to fight, tried to claw at her, tried to beg, but his voice was gone. His luck was gone. Mara rolled off the husk of what had once been a man, stretching her arms above her head as she admired the golden coin between her fingers.
Luck changes, sweetheart.
She murmured, then smiled. And just like that, she walked away, flipping the coin in her hand, leaving his broken form on the elegant marble floor. Jack managed one final plea.
Please, don't leave me like this.
A death rattle. Melodic laughter drifted down the hall. Luck was a bitch, but at least he got lucky one last time. Thank you for joining us on this spine-tingling episode of Paranormal Passion. We hope you enjoyed our blend of eerie tales with tantalizing twists, and that we left you longing for more. Please remember that all stories you've heard are written exclusively by Sarah, crafted to take you on a thrilling journey into the unknown. Our special guest voice today is Rita Bedard. And if you like what we're doing here, please feel free to drop us a 5-star review and give us a follow. Please note that these stories are not to be republished or used elsewhere without written consent from the Paranormal Passion team.